I'm going to show you a photograph of a white Suburban. It was parked at the crossroads of Caborca, where the roads lead up to the U.S. border. Stolen in Mesa, Arizona. The window was open. The engine was running. The air conditioning was on. And there was blood leaking out of this door. Inside the passenger compartment was a message written in red on 2 full-size bed sheets, essentially warning whoever read the message that there is a new gang in town, and if you interfere with them, this is what will happen to you, which is clearly a terroristic message. This is when you start into terrorism leaves criminal violence and becomes terrorism. And this is what was in the Suburban. Now you can't see it really well, but this particular individual and this particular individual still have their heads on. They showed sign of extreme trauma to the head, like a heavy blunt object. And you can see in several places here where the people were bound. One of the most predominant binding materials we see is the white plastic rope they use on hay bales. Now all the photographs you'll see were first on the scene, crime scene photographs that police officers took. Now, anybody ever been to Acapulco? Acapulco Guerrero was a very popular tourist destination and resort town. Tourists from all over the world would go visit Acapulco. The transnational criminals that inhabit Mexico seemingly operate without any concern of being held accountable in any way for their actions. I just talked to some people that came back from Mexico from that area, and they report seeing groups of 5 to 7 people that don't speak Spanish or English or French, that look like men in their late 20s to early 40s. They look very Arabic. There are no children, there are no women with them. It's just a group of men. And the people that run the concessions there find that unusual. The extreme criminal violence that has become commonplace in Acapulco is evidence of extreme lawlessness. This cannot occur until the law enforcement in the area has been neutralized. And that is when you start seeing this kind of thing happen. The progression of events from patterns to trends has gone full circle in places like Acapulco, Villa Juarez, now Monterrey, Laredo, Nuevo Laredo, and Matamoros. All of those are access to the border areas. This is what was in Acapulco. This is what is called flailing, where they actually skin the face of the human off of the skull. And they leave the skull and the face, the skinned skull with the face. And this was a 16-year-old boy that was left on a lounge chair beside a pool in a motel with his hands in just his head. This goes beyond criminal violence. This is domestic terrorism. This is what is going on in Mexico right now. You hadn't heard about that, had you? What was going on in Mexico is exactly why the Arizona legislature drafted SB 1070. They realized that it was almost too late. Now, did you hear that in the media? Now we need to talk about the situation in New Mexico from an intelligence perspective. Understand that everything that you're going to see is a crime scene photograph. Now, you have to look at things from the perspective of Mexico. So you're in Mexico looking north. To the east is Ciudad Juarez, considered to be the most lawless and violent city in Mexico, and only second in the world. If you'll Google the House of Torture scandal in Juarez, you'll see more background information on Juarez and bring into larger question what exactly the U.S. government's doing in the drug war on drugs. Note the physical similarities between the wilderness study in Arizona and the area in yellow that is outlined in black within the immediate border area extending into the United States border region. Particularly, this has mountainous areas. Now, that didn't show up good when we put the yellow on there. But it is mountainous, and if you know where the Petrillos are, you know they're mountainous. You have the two intersecting highways, I-10 and 25, the railroads, the pipelines, airport nearby. And then there's Las Cruces. That's where we are right now. And it's here for the transnational criminal to stage whatever contraband or criminal structure they wish to control. The outlying areas are relatively inhabited. And if you'll talk to drug law enforcement officers across the nation, when they start finding out who the main players in these drug cartels are, they're prominent citizens in their community. They live among us. For all we know, there's one sitting here right now. There are secondary roads that access the interior of Doña Ana County, uninhabited corridors flanking the law enforcement controls in place leading to Albuquerque and the interior of the United States. I remember when I was still working, they were smuggling aliens up the reservoir on the east side of the Truth and Consequences checkpoint. Immediately to the west, you have Palomas, Mexico, and Columbus, New Mexico. West of Columbus, New Mexico is the Chiricahua National Monument in the Animas Valley. I just gave Dudley a copy of a letter from a rancher that lives in that area, Rob Krentz's brother-in-law. It talks about what's still going on there. West of Columbus is the Chiricahua National Monument in the Animas Valley. From there north to Interstate 10, the transnational criminals have already taken control of the federal public lands and operate with impunity there. The unsolved crimes, such as the murder of Rob Krentz near Portal, Arizona, and Larry Link at Steins, New Mexico, are clear indicators of the existence of a lawless area immediately to the west of this proposed area. This area, highlighted in yellow, appears to have all of the physical characteristics of an ideal crime corridor. Below Columbus, New Mexico, is the Mexican town of Ascension, Chihuahua. Ascension, like Caborca, lies on a road that accesses the federal public lands on the New Mexico side of the border. There was an ice chest that was marked as public vaccinations and delivered by common carrier, kind of like our UPS, to the police station in Ascension. The police in Ascension attribute the dead men to a turf war between rival smuggling organizations, much as was reported in Caborca. They realized, the people, the local police on the ground realized this isn't cartel activity. It is two criminal groups, or three criminal groups actually, vying for access to the smuggling corridors inside the United States. What you have to remember is the point of sale for drugs and illegal aliens is inside the United States. Until they get the contraband inside the United States, there's no sale. Money doesn't change hands. In the ice chest, marked public vaccinations was delivered by common carrier. This event also clearly is an act of domestic terrorism. From the intelligence perspective, there are similarities between the Caborca incident and this ice chest incident in Ascension, primarily the onus of domestic terrorism. The reporting of conflicts between rival smuggling organizations and the obvious access to the smuggling corridors inside the United States. Remember, that is also connected to the two intentionally set fires. Next, we have another suburban traveling north from Mexican Federal Highway 2 to the Palomas Port of Entry. Now, immediately on the opposite side is Columbus, New Mexico. Before this suburban came into view, the personnel at the Palomas Port of Entry on the Mexican side could hear automatic weapon fire south of the Port of Entry. A few minutes later, this red Suburban with two dead occupants and one still barely alive rolled up to the Port of Entry. The living person lives long enough to relate that they were passed by a pickup truck, and as the pickup truck passed, three men sat up in the back of the pickup and poured automatic weapon fire into the red Suburban, which eventually killed the three occupants. All three deceased occupants were wearing clothing that suggests they were some type of Mexican law enforcement official. The Ascension event and the Palomas event are indicators of extreme lawlessness immediately south of the New Mexico border. There is also abundant evidence of the existence of transnational criminals already living and operating in New Mexico. There are various domestic policies that exist in New Mexico that may provide a welcoming environment and atmosphere for the transnational criminals, such as a sanctuary-type city, or permitting them to, the people that are transnational criminals to have driver's licenses. As Arizona continues to go on the offensive against criminal violence associated with their border region, there's likely to be a push to move the criminal operations eastward. A suspected pattern has already been reported about cartels moving their operations into the United States because of the extreme violence in Mexico. As in the case of Jose Trevino Morales, we have the owner of the winning quarter horse of the All-American Futurity at Ruidoso, New Mexico, who paid $3 million for 2 racehorses at one auction. Jose Trevino Morales is directly connected to Los Zetas, which is an extremely violent transnational criminal organization located primarily in Mexico. Technically, if you refer to the Zetas as a cartel, that's incorrect. They're a transnational criminal organization. They're just as active in Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, and Central America as they are inside the United States. It would be in their interest, and I'm talking about the transnational criminals, to see Las Cruces crime corridor fully developed to their advantage. Because Arizona has made up their mind that their transnational criminals are going somewhere else. They are starting to deal with it. Let's talk about Cesar Vega Munoz. He's a confirmed member of an ultra-violent transnational criminal organization based in Juarez. Do you know that almost all of these cartel-type criminal murders begin with a kidnapping? Because what they want is information from the people. Once they get the information, they kill them. And he's working at the Burger King in Socorro, New Mexico. Nice, quiet little town, not exactly on the border. A lot of people knew him. He'd been residing there a long time. But he's an escaped convict. And kidnapping people normally in Mexico are murderers. That's what they did. There's no way to look at a person and know whether or not they're the people that are perpetrating these kind of crimes. Now there's Juan Galindo, resident of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Photograph taken at a sports stadium. Looks innocent enough. For all we know, you might meet him walking down the street in Las Cruces or Albuquerque. He may even remind you of your current neighbor, which should not be unusual because Mr. Galindo has lived in New Mexico for quite a while. However, Mr. Galindo is not someone you would want to associate with, especially if you have young female children. The whole point of public safety is keeping these kind of people out of the United States. Juan Galindo is another transnational criminal. Criminal alien, previously deported from the United States, convicted narcotics trafficker, charged with sexually assaulting a 4-week-old female infant to death, January 2012. Could you look at him walking down the street and tell he was capable of that kind of stuff? Longtime resident in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque, a sanctuary type city that's welcoming to these folks. We've taken you through the intelligence briefing on criminal violence along the Arizona-New Mexico border. I think by now the trend should be clear. Remember we talked about events, patterns, trends? I've taken you through the events and patterns, and now we're at the trends. Here's what we found out in Arizona. Creating enhanced federal land protections near the international border, and I said near, not at, promotes lawless environment. The transnational criminals take advantage of the lawless areas along the border to develop crime borders. And the conclusion to all this is pretty simple. If you do it, you're promoting border insecurity. That facilitates transnational criminal violence. It is so clear in Arizona that the governor wrote a book about it called Scorpions for Breakfast. I hadn't read her book until after I did this PowerPoint. They're parallel. The information that Arizona has gained, please take benefit of it in New Mexico. You don't want these people over here. Thank you.